I'd like to extend an official welcome to you both today. Thank you very, very much for agreeing to be part of our Memories of Plymouth project. This is initiated by the Plymouth Historical Society. We're going to have a series of questions today, and some of them will be just to identify who you are. So I'm going to do an introduction right now. This is Charlie Durgin, his sister, Mary Durgin.
Right.
Are we ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. The first couple of questions, for those people that may not know you, they've heard of you but do not know you, this is just going to identify to them who you are, where you were born perhaps, schooling, etc. And then we'll get into more involved topical areas. So the first one is, if you don't mind, please state your name.
Mary Durgin.
And Charles Durgin.
No middle names?
Mariella, named after my grandmother.
And I'm Charles Bowles. I was named after the Bowles family.
And who was Mr. Bowles, please?
He was he was president of the bank.
No, he was Dr. Bowles.
That's another one.
No,
Okay, we have two.
Right.
We have two. Where were you born?
I was born at the Plymouth Hospital that was on Route 3, 2 miles north of Plymouth. And my home is diagonally across from the hospital. So it was real nearby. And it's unique. We really grew up in Campton, but the house is just over the line in Campton. And we really participated in all the Plymouth activities because it was so much nearer.
So we call you a townie? We'll decide over the next couple of several interviews who's a townie. Is it a person who was born in Plymouth? Is it a person who's worked in Plymouth, who socialized in Plymouth? That'll be up to them. Charlie, where were you born?
I was born over to the hospital, as I say. I think it opened that year of 1921 when I was born.
Wow.
And so I definitely was born in Plymouth, right.
Okay. When did you move to Plymouth? Because you have lived here for an extended period of time.
Oh, yeah, of course I was born and brought up in the home where Mary lives now. And then I was in the service, of course.
Mm-hmm. And then when did you move to Cumming Street?
That was about 50 years ago.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your education. Did you have formal education in Plymouth, or would that have been in Campton?
I went to Plymouth Elementary School. I started in 1940 in first grade. I think we were the second class that was in the present, well, it's owned by the college now, but it was the elementary school.
Plymouth Elementary.
Yes, and I went there for 8 years. And then I went to Plymouth High School and graduated in 1952. And I went on to Laconia Business College for 1 year, and they moved it to Concord, so then I went to Concord Commercial College and graduated in 1954. And what was unique about that, I rode the train to school every day when I went to both Laconia and Concord. So
can you remember the name of the train? Would it have been Boston?
It was the Boston, Maine, yes. Yes, it came down from Woodsville, picked us up early in the morning, took us down, and we'd go down and wait at either Laconia station the first year and Concord station the second, and come back up on it.
You wouldn't remember the price that it cost you to go?
No, because my father paid for it.
Okay.
I had no idea.
Yes, I of course lived in the same house, and we weren't supposed to be going to school in Plymouth, but we did, and I don't know when no one ever caught up with us.
Because you were so close on the line.
That's it. But no one picked it up that we were actually residents of Campton, so we all went to the Plymouth School for 8 years.
Oh, we won't tell anybody.
Yeah, and it was an 8-room school up on Fairgrounds Road now. It's a home.
Livermore.
And It was all 8 grades in one school.
Can you remember a teacher's name?
Oh yes, Carolyn Stevens. In fact, I had the same teacher that my father had.
Wow.
And yeah, we had 2 doors. The girls went in one door and the boys went in the other.
Was there a reason for this?
Yeah, I guess in those days, yeah, we weren't supposed to be too mingly. I don't know.
Oh, all right. Mary, do you have a thought like that at all? Can you remember any of your days at school?
Oh,
then?
I loved grade school. We had wonderful teachers, and my first one was Marion Seavey in first grade. And she was just wonderful because I was kind of shy and didn't really want to go to school. And so she really took me under her wing, and it was a wonderful year, as were all the other 7 years in grade school.
Wow.
All the teachers were so kind and motherly. I know my 8th grade teacher was Anna Brown from Wentworth. And we didn't segregate middle school in those days. It was all, 8 grades and that was it. And I remember Albert Merrill taught 7th grade. And I don't remember many men teachers. They were mostly all women.
Do you know the enrollment of the school at that time approximately?
I have no idea. They were pretty small. I think in our school in first grade, there might have been 20.
20. That's still considered an average today.
Yeah.
Good numbers, good
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Do you mind sharing the difference in age between the two of you?
Well, I was born in 1934, and Charles was born in 1921.
I'm doing my math.
That's it.
13 years difference.
Up to 13?
13, yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Relative to businesses, have you held a job, a series of jobs during your time in Plymouth?
I had one job, and when I graduated from Concord Commercial College, the president of the Pemigewasset National Bank came to me and said there was an opening in the loan department. So he said, why don't you go down and be interviewed? And it was Bert Pulsifer, who was a great friend of the family. And so I did, and I got the job in the loan department. And I was there for 45 years. I, as I say, started in the loan department, and then they built their first branch in Campton. And I became the branch manager for 14 years. And then I came back to Plymouth in the same building on Main Street, and I stayed there as human resources for several years until they added on to the branch in West Plymouth, and that became the main branch. So I went up there and I continued to do human resources, but then I was secretary to the president, Fletcher Adams. And I was on the 3rd floor. It was a wonderful, my room was wonderful, and I just enjoyed working at the bank all those years.
Can you tell the audience where the Pemigewasset Bank was located?
It was right off the Common, on Highland Street, the first on Highland Street.
Is that where Northway Bank is
Yes,
now?
it's where
Thank you.
Northway is now.
Thank you.
I spent 1 year in the bank building next to the post office. That was the original bank.
Wow.
And then they moved over there in 1955, and as it happened, President Eisenhower was in the area, and Sherman Adams got him to cut the ribbon for our bank because Sherman had been a director of the bank. So that was quite a thing.
Fascinating, fascinating. Thank you, thank you. Charlie?
Yes. My first job was working for the Mobile Oil Company. I went to Concord for about 3.5 years, and then I was in Portsmouth 3.5 years. And for some reason, I decided to buy out Bert Flanders' oil business here in Plymouth. And I bought that out, and was in business for about 8 years. And I also bought out Garden Oil up in Lincoln. I had a store up there and sold that out. And then I, of course, ran the service station down South Main Street across from in those days, the old First National store.
How long did you run that for?
That was about, I think, about 15 years.
Wow, wow.
And then I had an automobile background, and I sold out and took over the auto cars in the university. Of course, that was Plymouth State College then. And I worked on their automobiles, bought them and kept them up. And
How did you get attracted to such a business, oil business?
well, just because going to work for the Mobile Oil Company was a very good outfit. I should have probably stayed there, but but I didn't. And being in business for yourself, though, it was really a great experience.
I think that's the next question I'm going to ask you. In the businesses you were involved with for so long, was there one reason why you stayed that many years?
I stayed at the bank because they had good benefits and they had a wonderful crew. We were like a family for many, many years. And I can say that I enjoyed going to work every day. Wow.
That's quite a statement today.
And I'm reaping from it today because of their retirement and
Great.
so forth. So,
Charlie, a reason why you stayed in the business all those years associated with oil?
Well, I guess you'd say it's because it's a business that you know about, and like I was in the weather. Being in the oil business, you had to keep degree days. That all associated with weather.
Oh, can you share a little bit with the audience about your interest in weather?
Yeah, well, as I say, that's how I got interested in one way. And I don't know if any people remember, there was Belknap College in
Center Harbor.
Center Harbor, and Bill Hovey was the meteorologist, and he knew I was in weather, and he gave me a rain gauge to find out how much rain we got in Plymouth, but I mean, he was associating whether one area got more rain than another. It's one of the reasons that got me interested in it, besides having the degree days for the oil business. Degree days are very important in the oil business. Like my house, if I have 7 degree days, I use 1 gallon of oil. So that's how you keep track of when the oil companies know when to deliver without having to ask you.
Can I ask you a question about yesterday's rainfall? How much did we reap?
We had about 2¼ inches.
2¼ inches?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Would you like to share what you have here with the audience?
Yes, being in the weather, the most outstanding thing, and I started keeping the weather in 1970, and the most outstanding thing that really makes you realize how fickle the weather can be, in December of 1989, we had the coldest December on record. There was 17 days, 0 or below. The average temperature was, for the month, was 11.5, and normal is 24.6. That's how much colder it was than normal. And then the next month, January, it turned around and to be one of the warmest Januaries on record, and there was only one day one above. There was no days below zero in January. After having 17 in December.
Thank you for doing that. The questions now, there'll be a variety of questions I'll be asking you, some about the weather, your time here, the restaurants that you might have gone to. So the first question I have for both of you is, could you share with us some of your reflections on living in Plymouth, being in Plymouth, socializing in Plymouth as a youth, a young adult?
Well, of course, as I said, we did everything in Plymouth, even though we lived in Campton. We attended the Plymouth Congregational Church. I was in the Girl Scouts. I was in Rainbow. And Juvenile Grange. And we, of course, shopped the stores, and just everything was associated with Plymouth.
I'm going to share this with you, and perhaps, Mary, you can do the same with the audience here. Do you remember receiving, let's see, both of you attended the church, am I correct?
Right,
That's the Congregational
yes,
Church?
yes.
And this was in honor of, do you know what that was?
Baccalaureate. This was my baccalaureate.
And the date on that, please?
1952.
1952.
And in fact, this one is my brother's. He also had his baccalaureate there in 1939.
1939. And let's hold on to this. Charlie, you want to share with the audience a little bit about this?
Well, this is, I guess I'm the oldest member of the Plymouth Congregational Church. I joined it in March of 1937 when I was baptized. That's a few days ago.
All right, so I'm not sure. And so they gave this to you on this date, March
Right.
28th, 1937. Oh my gosh. Pristine, beautiful, thank you.
Yeah.
So the two of you have contributed, have supported the church
We
over
did
the
for
years?
years and years, yes.
Right.
And I was treasurer for over 30 years of the church. And whoops, the question coming up related to the church. So
Well, that's all right, whenever. Do you have a special memory of you growing up in Plymouth?
No, other than I brought up about going to the Fireman's Ball, which was a big date in Plymouth, and
1956, 1954, 1955.
but they had it every year, and they always got in a big-named orchestra. They didn't have just the run-of-the-mill orchestra.
All right.
They went outside. You read those programs, tells about what orchestras they had.
Glenn Allen and his orchestra?
Right, I know. Of course, those, as I say, they usually picked a big band from New England. In other words, they didn't have a local band.
Dave Manuel,
Yeah,
and then Dick Hingston's orchestra.
yeah, I know.
And did you have a donation? Were you charged to go to this?
Oh yes, they sold tickets ahead of time
And did the
to
money
raise money for their uniforms and things like that.
This is great. And you were part of it.
Well, my father was. I just remember. It usually was held in the spring of the year, like April or May.
In the spring, when the flowers are popping up.
Right.
it goes back to the 30s. We had some of those from the mid-30s.
Wow. And when did what led to its demise, or why do we no longer have this? Do we know?
Oh, well, I guess it's like everything. You just don't get the overheads of doing it exceed the profits you can make.
That leads me to another question. Can you remember our fairs that we had?
Oh, yes.
It's my recollection that the Plymouth Fair was the oldest fair in the state.
Yes, I always went every year as a child with my mother and grandmother and aunt. In fact, my father would take a car over and park it near the racetrack because they had the most wonderful parade every year. And it was a big parade, and of course it had lots of animals and floats. Charles and I remember doing a float for the Campton Grange, and but they just had, I don't know how many, and it was just a wonderful fair. And afterwards we'd go on the Midway, and then they had the buildings with all the exhibits in them, and they was great, and they had animals all around in pens and so forth, and my cousins were in charge of the maple sugar building because they were maple sugar growers. And I remember they used to, like Demings and Pease would bring new cars over and display them. And it was just wonderful. We spent the whole day there and usually took a picnic or ate in one of the booths that they had there.
Was there a fee to get in?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can you remember what the fee was?
I don't.
Okay,
I don't, no.
that's fine. We'll switch. We'll switch. We've lived in Plymouth a long time, and you've seen how the weather has affected us. We live here because we love the seasons, but each season has some positive things, having the tulips up right now, but we've had some negative things. Can you reference a few of the times that you remember about the weather and how it affected this town?
Well, in 1938, I was 4 years old, and I vaguely remember the hurricane that we had. There was a blackout, and of course it was just trees were coming down everywhere, and I was scared, of course, being only 4 years old, and I was sitting in my grandfather's lap, and he was consoling me. And I remember that my dad couldn't get home because water surrounded the town of Plymouth. And it was really a traumatic experience for a 4-year-old.
Charlie?
Yeah, that I've told you down on the senior citizens building now, which of course was the railroad station then, the water was up on that 2 feet or 3 feet.
And you think there's a marker there?
There was a marker. I don't know whether someone stole it or not, but there should be a round place where they had a line where the water was.
Wow, wow.
That's a lot of water when you flood up there.
Did anyone lose their lives during this time, or
don't
houses
recall.
were ruined? I would assume,
don't-
maybe?
I don't
No?
recall.
I don't
Of course, I
remember
was
that,
too young to
no.
remember unless I read about it, but I don't recall it.
Okay. Do we have hurricanes here at all? Can you remember any
That's the
hurricanes?
only that was a hurricane.
That was a
38.
the only one
Yeah,
we
that was the
remember.
And that
only.
caused the flooding.
Yes.
Right.
Fires. We've had a couple of fires in town. Do you have any memories of that?
I wasn't too old when the Methodist church burned on Main Street. I remember my father was a fireman, and they couldn't get water because it was so cold. I believe it was way below freezing, and they just had to let it burn. But I remember that one, and I remember the Plymouth Congregational Church burning. I was very active at the time, and I woke up that morning and turned on the radio, and they said that the church was burning. So I went racing down because at the time I was treasurer, of course. And so by the time I got there, it was pretty well gone.
So the Methodist Church was in the early 40s,
Yes,
and the Congregational Church
about
would have been-
1985, I think.
Charlie,
and-
do you have memories of that?
Of the
Methodist Church?
no, I was in the service
During
when
that time?
when the fire was.
And the Congregational Church?
Well, I was working at the college at the time. I remember I walked to work that morning, and the first I saw was a lot of fire trucks around the church when I went to work. The first I knowing about it.
Wow, wow. All right, thank you, thank you. We've seen a lot of changes occur in the town of Plymouth. Would you like to cite one or two that may have affected you one way or the other?
Well, of course, the college has grown tremendously in the years. It was very small when I was growing up. It was Mary Lyon Hall and Rounds Hall and, you know, just a few buildings. So that has grown tremendously in Plymouth. And, of course, we've seen lots of changes in the stores and so forth.
Is there a store that has come and go? Have you seen stores come that you are happy to have them here, locate?
Well, I was kind of fascinated by Walmart coming in because we used to shop in other cities at Walmart. We thought it would be great to have it here. In fact, when it first started, I think I went down almost every day and walked around the store. So I was very infatuated with.
So that was our big box store,
Yes,
first big
that's
box
the
store.
first big box store.
Charlie?
Well, I guess the main thing I remember is building Hatch Plaza out here. Of course, before they built it, Hatch had a big farm. They had a big barn and things, and it was, of course, torn down. They built that, and that's why it's known as the Hatch Plaza. It was Mr. Hatch ran a big farm there.
Did he take his milk and
Yeah.
share that with the businesses as well as residents?
Yes,
He did.
yeah, he had milk routes. Where they
Yeah, and
delivered
delivered
the
door
milk.
to door.
Right.
Wow. So he must have had quite a crew helping him out.
Oh yeah.
Was Mr. Hatch from a large family?
I don't.
Can we
I
do
don't
that?
know. I can't say that. I don't know.
Okay. Oh, that's good. People that you have met during your decades here at Plymouth that have affected you in some way. Is there a special person that you would like to mention?
Well, I think Eva Spear made quite an impression on me. She, of course, was a local historian, and she was just the nicest lady, and I was involved in different things with her. She went to the Congregational Church, and she taught Bible study, and of course she wrote the history of the church and other histories of the area, and she was just, I looked up to her and thought she was just it.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. That's special.
And also, our minister, P.V. George, made quite an impression because he really lived what he preached. And he was and I found a lot of his sermons were on love, which, and I thought he was very impressive.
Do you know the era that P.V. George was here?
Oh, I'd have to look back, but I believe it was in the 1950s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have someone that affected you that you looked up to?
Well, of course, Clay's newsstand. Gordon Clay was a great mason, and of course I was involved with masonry. And he impressed me. I don't know if I should tell it or not. I'll never forget, of course I was in high school then, and Gordon running the store, and I went in and was reading a comic book. And I'll never forget him saying, "Charles," he says, he says, "I sell these books. I'm not a library."
So tell me the relationship between Gordon and John and Sam. Am I saying this correct?
Yeah.
John and Sam owned the store later?
Right, they took it over after their father, right?
Okay.
Gordon.
Did you have a best friend?
Yes, I had Louise Reed. She lived up behind the church, and her mother and my mother were best friends. And she was born 6 months after I was, so her mother and she would come up to the house, and very often, on a weekly basis anyway. And so we played together as children, and as I say, grew up in the Sunday school, went to Sunday school together, and lots of times after Sunday school, I'd go up to her house and we'd play for a while, and then my dad would come and pick me up. But, and to this day, we still communicate almost on a monthly basis, and she's now living in Colorado, so.
Amazing.
But
Amazing.
we've been friends all our lives.
Charlie, do you have a best friend?
Yeah, of course, my neighbor, he was in the same class as me, and we did everything together, went to movies a lot and everything together with them, and folks, of course, shared automobiles taking us to school. And
Did Do you have a name? Would you be willing to share it with us?
Oh, Leslie Sargent?
Leslie
Yeah.
Sargent.
Yeah, Junior, yeah.
Is he still alive?
No.
Passed?
He passed quite a few years ago.
Celebrations. Are there celebrations that have happened in Plymouth that you were part of, that you can remember?
I was involved a great deal in the 200th anniversary of the town. We had a big parade, I remember, and we had events. They had to be in the auditorium of the grade school. I don't think the college was here. The Silver Hall was here at that time. But we put on a play for the bicentennial, and it was reflected on the early years of Plymouth, and I can't remember what my part was, but I remember participating in it, and it was a great event. And also the other event that year was the ecumenical church service. They had that also in the auditorium, and every denomination participated. And I believe the sermon was given by Norris Cotton. And so that really stood out, to think that, you know, people of all religions could get together and do that.
Nice.
It was so nice.
I think you shared with me that at the 1963 event, you either purchased or they gave people
They gave maple trees,
Maple
baby
trees.
maple trees, and my dad and I got one, and we planted it in our front yard, and it's still there. And so it would have to be 54 years old now. Or no, 54 years. And I'd like to know if anyone else in the town got one and still have it.
Well, maybe Pemmy Baker TV is going to get several calls, and they'll let you know.
I hope so. It would be interesting, because it's just seemed to drop through the cracks. Nobody ever mentions it or even realized it happened.
Well, we're delighted you did. Thank you. Thank you on that one. Do you remember the 1963 celebration bicentennial?
Not that particular one. That wasn't when Eisenhower came, was it?
No, that was in '54 to cut the ribbon.
Yeah, because I remember being an Indian they had, I forget what organization I was with. Bill Driscoll was an Indian. We was an Indian, dressed up as Indians for it.
Maybe Pemigewasset Indians and
That's it. I've forgotten just what organization we was recognizing. But anyway, we dressed up to something to do with him going through and being Indians.
Another question. During your time in Plymouth, I'm assuming you visited some restaurants over time.
Yeah.
Was there a restaurant or two that had some foods that you can still remember to this day? Maybe the restaurant is no longer there, but was there a food?
I think the one that stands out the most with me was the Edgar's Diner, because it was when I was in school, and we'd go down there after a ball game, and a group of us would get together, but I don't remember any particular food, although I will say that it wasn't right in town, but the Teacher's Dairy Bar. And that was a wonderful restaurant. They had seafood, and we all enjoyed going there and eating. So.
Can you share with the audience where Edgar's was located, between what stores?
Oh, Edgar's was located where the Meredith Village Savings Bank is now. Yeah. And this was up beyond the where the Beckett School is now.
And who owned the
In
Teachers?
fact, they still have the building. And this was run by two teachers, which was George Zulius, the principal, and Bruce Ryan, who was a business teacher.
Any special foods, restaurants that you
Oh,
enjoyed?
yeah. Fausty Mini Kellogg's was across from the Plymouth Inn. Was always, his father ran it before them, and it was one of the older restaurants in town, and very well, had a lot of patrons.
It was a special place to go, I think,
Right.
after we had canteen, or after a football game,
Yeah.
or... Charlie, I know that you were affiliated. You're a service person. Thank you for serving.
Right.
During what era did you serve?
Oh,
What war?
I went in right after the Pearl Harbor in January 1942. And in July of 42, I left the States on a big passenger ship in the category of the Queen Mary. It was a Louis Pasteur. It was a French ship. I think the English had taken it over. We had an English crew. There was 5,000 of us on it going overseas. And we were 30 days going over. And we'd had no escort. It zigzagged all the way. They'd go this way for 10 minutes and this way 10, because it took a submarine 11 minutes to get around to be able to torpedo you, and that was their reason for zigzagging.
Wow. Wow.
And we was 30 days, and I went into Port Said 30 days later, and I was stationed in Palestine.
For how long?
I was there 3 or 4 months, and then we went down to Egypt. I was in Egypt another 6, 7 months. Then I was outside of Benghazi for 6 or 7 months. And then went over, and I ended up in Italy. I was over 2 years. Ended up in Italy and came home and was stationed in Davis Monathan Field in Tucson, Arizona.
Wow. Your brother was in the war at the same time?
Yes.
What was his name?
George.
George?
Yeah.
Did you get to see him at all?
Yes, we ran into each other over there. In fact, about the time I left my unit, 98th Bomb Group, he got assigned to it. I think he was there only about a month. But he had been in the hospital, and then they reassigned him, and it's amazing he ended up in my group.
Do you remember women that might have been involved in the service during World War II?
Well, I know that I can remember, I wasn't very old, but I can remember my mother and grandmother worrying about the boys because, of course, you didn't hear every day like you do today what they're doing or where they are. They might hear once a month or so, get a letter from them, and lots of times they'd be all cut up because they'd been censored. Oh. And so I can remember too. We had a service station, and this is the garage, and we were collecting rubber products for the war, and also I remember going picking milkweeds because they used them in the pods, and they used the silk for parachutes. And I remember collecting bags of them for the war effort.
Amazing.
And and the other thing I remember was going to the movies, and they'd have newsreels of something going on either in the Pacific or in Europe. So
Interesting. Really interesting. During your time growing up, or even currently, can you recollect any political upheavals that we may have had?
the only, I don't remember too much, just I remember Watergate at that time. And right here in New Hampshire, I don't ever recall anything being...
No state news, regional news,
Not
national
really,
news?
no.
Okay.
I remember, of course, we was in a big depression about the time that Franklin Delano Roosevelt got elected, and of course he made some radical changes. Banks were failing quite rapidly, and they closed all the banks when he got to be president right off the bat. And they reevaluated them, so to put them on a more stable basis. And then he created a lot of, like the CCCs and things like that.
To put people back to work?
WPA, put people back to work.
Sure. Did you know anybody that was involved with those programs?
Not directly, I don't think, no.
I know.
I know that they
But
work with the national
I think
parks.
the CCC built the dam in Campton.
Interesting. Interesting.
And the road out in Waterville also,
Yeah.
going from Waterville up to Woodstock.
Interesting. Are there industries, are there businesses, companies that have come and gone that you can remember?
Well, of course, Draper and Maynard was a big manufacturer. I wasn't very old when they closed. But I remember my folks talking about it, and they used to sew baseballs for them. And I remember them talking about Babe Ruth coming for a visit.
They can remember.
Yeah.
And
But
did they sew in the home? Or
yeah,
did
they
sew in the
sewed at
factories?
home.
Sewed at
yeah,
home, cottage industry.
sewed baseballs, yeah.
No, I don't know any great things.
Can you remember Sprague's Electric?
Oh, yes, I remember Sprague Electric.
So they would have come
right.
here during your tenure, but then they would have
Right,
left as well.
right. Then they moved, they closed this place and moved to Concord.
Concord, New
Yeah.
Hampshire. Concord, New Hampshire. Did you have an artifact that you found that you might want to share with the audience today?
Well, I brought my mother's 1927 diary, and she kept a diary almost yearly, all the years she was married. And I was going through things one day, and this popped up as 1927, and it was the first year Charles went to school, so she tells all about that. And it was the first, it was that year that they got a bathroom. Before that, they had an outhouse, and it tells about her first bath in a bathtub, and things like that. It's just wonderful to read it,
Well, that takes
and
us
what
back.
life was like in 1927.
1927. Would you have gone to first grade, Charlie?
Yeah.
First grade. We would not have had kindergarten then at all.
No,
just first
no.
grade, right. No kindergarten all day.
And would you mind chatting about that?
Oh, when I had the oil business, gentleman up in Campton built a new house. So I filled his oil tank after he got built. Of course, it was the first fill-in, so I put in 254 gallons, and it cost him $39.90.
We have a picture of you here with an artifact that you actually brought. So if you'll hold on to that for a second. And here's your, there we
Right.
go. Want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, Andrew Hancock worked for me when I had the gas station nights and things. And of course, I guess I was always saying to him the first 100 years are the hardest. So on my 95th birthday, he took one of his old Mobile shirts that he had, and he made this picture of it, with it. He cut this off the shirt, and the flying red horse, and it says the first 100 years are always the hardest.
He never forgot. He
Never forgot.
And how long would he have kept that shirt?
Oh, I know it. That's gonna
Oh
be,
my gosh.
yeah.
And then we have one more picture that you wanted to share today. Do you mind?
That's just the lady up to the high school that does photography took a picture of me and my favorite cat sitting beside of me.
If there was something, we don't know our audience today, who's going to be listening, but is there something that you would like to share with those folks listening today? Maybe this will be recorded and shared 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Is there something you want to tell future generations about your time in Plymouth?
I think my advice to the young people today, or the families, I was brought up in a loving family, and we, every weekend or every Sunday was family day. And we would go to church, and then we would put up a picnic and go somewhere, either in the mountains or one of the lakes, and have a picnic. And also, we were always together at mealtime. And I think today it's got away from that families are going in every direction, and they don't spend as much time as a family as they should, because it's just a wonderful experience to have a home that has a family-oriented background.
Thank you. Well said. Charlie?
Now is this?
Yeah, I think it is.
Well, I think for the future generations, it's a rapidly changing world. It is important to keep up with it and adjust to the many changes.
If there was something outside of what you just shared to leave the townspeople of Plymouth, again, I'm thanking you for coming today and being the first interviewees. But if somebody's going to review this they're watching on film, outside of what you have just shared, is there anything else that we may have missed?
Well, I'd just like to say that the Main Street was an important part of our lives as young people. And I sat down when you asked if we'd be interviewed and wrote down all the little stores that are gone. And there's over 30 of them. Plus, there were 9 gas stations on Main Street at one time. And it was so nice to go into the different stores. You knew everybody, and you knew the ones that owned them. And I had such wonderful experiences in the different ones as a child. Going in with my mother or my grandparents. I remember very distinctly going in your father's store. He had a hot cashews, and we'd go in there and buy a bag, and oh, they were so good. And different stores that really left an impression, like Adam's Supermarket and Volpe's. My grandfather would take me in there to get a box of Cracker Jacks, and I couldn't wait to see what I'd get for a prize. And J.J. Newberry's, you could buy things for a nickel or a dime, and it was so much fun.
Now, these are beautiful memories that you have shared with us today.
It's wonderful.
You've taken us back a ways.
And I remember your father aging his own cheese. Always, he was famous for his cheese.
Well, it was a big, huge, round tub. You'd
Right.
have to turn it around every
right,
so
I
often.
know,
For 2
he
years,
aged
I
it
think.
himself down Sulla.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Oh my gosh.
And
Good
Deming Chevrolet and Pease Motors were on Main Street. And when I went to work at the bank, I bought my first car, which was a 1954 Chevy Bel Air hardtop. It was a beauty.
It's a beauty.
It was red and white, and the inside was red. No, it was white. And I think it was a demonstrator. I bought it from Eddie Pettingill, and I think I paid around $600 for it.
My eyes are
I wished
rolling.
I had it now.
Well, I think one more time, thank you so much
Right.
for your willingness. You're our first interviewees, and
Wow.
we're looking forward to many others. But I think it's important for us to really reflect on what a community is. And your stories today have helped us think about times past, how important it is to know the neighbors that sometimes we don't haven't met yet. So I thank you very, very much. I'm pleased that the
Okay.
Historical Society has taken on this initiative for the next several months.
It's been fun, and it's brought back so many memories, and I've gone through so many things at home that to bring here today, and it just is, it's been a good experience, and we thank you for asking us.
And
Maybe we should remind people to dig out their pictures every once in a while.
Yes.
And most importantly, write something on the back so that future generations might remember the scenario that takes place with the people that are in them. Is that fair to say?
That's a good idea.
and I don't know if we brought out enough about our house was in Campton, but my father belonged to the Plymouth Fire Company for 40 years, and the fire alarm would ring and we'd rush. We could hear it up, can you imagine, 2 miles out of town, we'd hear the fire alarm. I'd rush up and say, Dad, the fire alarm's ringing, away he'd go out of the yard. Flying.
Yeah, and they had numbers on the boxes.
Yeah.
And it would ring the number of the box, so we had a list, so he'd know right where the fire was.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Maybe this should have been a 4-hour interview today. Thank you very much for being part of this. It was fun.